The silence in the birthing chamber swallowed even the sound of breathing. 3 royal physicians stood around a cradle carved from black stone, their hands steady but their faces carefully blank. They had delivered verdicts before, had pronounced deaths, had carried news that broke even immortal hearts. But this was different. This was the heir, the future of a kingdom that had stood for 8 centuries, the son of a king who did not accept failure. Theron Ashcroft, vampire king of the Nightborn realm, stood perfectly still beside the cradle. His silver eyes were fixed on the tiny bundle wrapped in crimson silk. The child was pale, too pale, even for vampire lineage, and the stillness was wrong. Newborns moved, twitched, breathed. This one did nothing. Chief Physician Mordain cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the oppressive quiet. "Your Majesty," he began, voice tight with practiced composure. "The infant has no heartbeat, no breath, no response to blood resonance. We have verified these findings multiple times." The words landed like stones in deep water, sinking, final. Theron did not move, did not speak. His hands remained at his sides, though every muscle in his body screamed to reach into the cradle, to touch his son, to will life back into flesh that had never truly held it. The queen consort had died bringing this child into the world, had bled out despite every magical intervention the court could summon. Her last words had been a plea. "Save him, save our son." Theron had promised, had sworn on his immortal soul that their child would live, and now 3 physicians were telling him that promise meant nothing. Mordain continued, filling the silence because silence in the presence of a grieving king was dangerous. "We recommend immediate preservation rites. The body can be maintained in stasis. Funeral arrangements can proceed with dignity." Body, the word cut like silver through flesh. Theron's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. Power rippled through the chamber, ancient, terrible. The kind of power that came from 247 years of absolute rule, of crushing rebellions, of making kingdoms kneel. The physicians felt it, took half steps back, prepared for the explosion everyone expected when Theron Ashcroft was denied something he wanted. But the explosion did not come. Instead, something worse. Control. Perfect icy control that suggested violence leashed but not diminished. "Leave us." The command was soft, almost gentle, which made it more terrifying than any shout. Mordain hesitated. "Your Majesty, protocol requires that we remain to oversee the preservation." Theron's gaze shifted, pinned the physician like a butterfly to board. "I said leave." They left, quickly, quietly. The door closed behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Theron stood alone in the birthing chamber, alone except for the cradle, alone except for the son who would never know his name. He reached down, lifted the infant with hands that had signed 1,000 death warrants but trembled now. The child was small, fragile, perfect in every detail except the one that mattered most. He was not breathing. Theron pressed his son against his chest, felt the absence of heartbeat, the terrible stillness of flesh that should have been squirming with new life. His queen had died for this, had given everything, and he could not even save what she'd left behind. The sound that escaped Theron's throat was not a sob. Kings did not sob. But it was close, raw, broken, the sound of something fundamental cracking. That was when the door opened. Not with the knock of a servant, not with the announcement of nobility. It opened the way doors opened for people who were not supposed to matter. Quietly, cautiously, almost apologetically. A young woman stepped inside. She wore work clothes, simple gray fabric, hair tied back severely, hands that showed the evidence of labor, scrubbing, cleaning, the endless invisible work that kept castles functioning. She was human, obvious from the warmth of her skin, the rhythm of her breathing, the fact that she did not belong in this chamber, did not belong in the royal wing at all. A guard moved to intercept. One of the 2 posted outside who had been too shocked by the physician's exodus to stop this intruder. "Wait!" The woman's voice was soft but urgent. "Please, he's not dead." The guard reached for her arm. The king ordered privacy, but she stepped past him. Boldness or desperation. Either way, it carried her into the chamber, into Theron's line of sight. She was young, maybe 26, plain features that would be easy to overlook in a crowd, except for her eyes. They were sharp, focused, holding the kind of certainty that came from knowledge rather than hope. And they were fixed on the infant in Theron's arms. He should have killed her, for the intrusion, for the presumption, for daring to speak of his son as though death was negotiable. Instead, he heard himself speak. One word, rough, demanding, explain. The woman swallowed. Her courage was fraying at the edges, but she held her ground. I work in the lower medical wing, laundry, cleaning. I was in the corridor when the physicians left. I heard what they said. She took a breath. But I've seen this before, in texts, old texts. There's a condition that mimics death in newborn infants, especially those with mixed blood heritage. Mixed blood. The term sent ice through Theron's spine. The woman continued, voice gaining strength from her own conviction. It's called crimson stillness. The body slows everything to almost nothing. Heartbeat becomes too faint to detect. Breathing stops. The child appears dead. But it's not death. It's protection. The body hiding until it senses safety. Theron stared at her, processing, testing her words against his own knowledge, against 2 centuries of accumulated information. He knew of no such condition, but he also knew the blood court suppressed information it deemed dangerous. Mixed blood was dangerous, implied weakness, suggested that vampire purity was not absolute. If she was right, if his son lived in some suspended state, then the physicians had been wrong, had almost convinced him to bury a child who could be saved. If she was lying, if this was delusion or cruelty or some plot he did not yet understand, then she would die screaming. He made his decision in heartbeats, the kind of decision that defined rule, risk versus reward, unknown versus certain loss. Show me. The woman's eyes widened, relief and terror mixing. She had not expected to get this far, had probably expected death the moment she stepped through the door. She approached slowly, hands visible, movements careful, stopping a respectful distance from the king who held his son like a shield. I need to examine him, to check specific signs. It will not hurt him. Theron's grip tightened, protective, possessive, every instinct screaming not to hand his son to a stranger, to a human, to someone whose name he did not even know. But what choice existed? The physicians had declared death. This woman spoke of life, and Theron Ashcroft had not built a kingdom by refusing calculated risks. He moved to the examination table, laid his son down with a gentleness that contradicted every hard line of his body, stepped back, but only barely, close enough to strike if she did anything he did not approve. The woman approached the table. Her hands were shaking now, but they moved with competence, checking the infant's color, pressing fingers to points on his throat, his wrist, his chest. She leaned close, listening, so still that Theron could hear her heartbeat, fast, frightened, but steady. Then she straightened, looked at him with those sharp eyes. There, his skin is too warm. True death in vampire infants causes rapid cooling. He's maintaining temperature. That means circulation, minimal, but present. Theron felt hope crack through his chest like lightning. Dangerous, painful, the kind of hope that could destroy if it was false. The woman continued. And here, she indicated a faint blue tinge at the infant's lips. This is not cyanosis from death. This is the body conserving oxygen, slowing everything to survive. How do you know this? The question came out sharp, demanding, because this was not common knowledge, was not something a laundry servant should possess. The woman hesitated, fear flickering across her face, then resignation, because some truths once spoken could not be unspoken. My father researched this condition, documented it. He was a physician. Before the court executed him for practicing forbidden medicine, the air in the chamber changed, became charged, because suddenly this was not just about an infant, was about politics, about the past, about decisions Theron had made that reached forward to shape this moment. Your father's name. His voice was cold now. The king returning. The woman lifted her chin, defiant despite her fear. Magnus Brennan, Surgeon Commander. You signed his execution order 12 years ago. Theron remembered. Not the name. He signed too many orders to remember individual names, but he remembered the charges. Treason. Treating enemy wounded during a border conflict. Researching bloodline conditions that challenged purity doctrine. He had not hesitated when signing. The law was clear. Treason meant death. Compassion could not supersede order. But now that decision had come back, wearing the face of a young woman who held the knowledge to save his son. You should hate me. The statement was not apology, was observation. The woman, Brennan's daughter, met his gaze. I should. Her voice was steady, But hating you won't save him. And my father believed that healing transcends politics, that innocent lives matter more than grudges. Theron studied her, reassessing. This was not a servant, was not simple. This was someone who carried her father's conviction even knowing it had killed him. Dangerous, useful, possibly both. Can you cure this? He indicated his son. This crimson stillness? I believe so, but I need time, and supplies. And I need you to trust that I'm not here for revenge. Theron's mouth curved, not a smile. Too sharp for that. Trust is not my strength. The woman glanced at the infant. Then trust that I want to prove my father was right, that his death meant something, that the knowledge he died protecting has value. That, Theron understood, legacy, purpose, the need to make suffering count for something. He crossed to the door, opened it. The guard snapped to attention. Find Lucian. Tell him to bring the medical texts from the restricted archive. Everything on bloodline conditions. Everything Magnus Brennan wrote before his execution. The guard hesitated. Your Majesty, those texts are forbidden. Then I am breaking my own law. Go. The guard left, running. Because when Theron Ashcroft gave orders in that tone, kingdoms moved. Theron turned back to the woman. You have until my steward arrives. Prove your theory. If you're right, you'll be rewarded. If you're wrong, you'll join your father. The threat was clear, honest, but the woman did not flinch. Fair enough. She returned to the infant, began speaking, not to Theron, to herself, working through the procedure aloud. Crimson stillness requires 3 things to break: warmth, resonance, familiar blood presence. The body is hiding because it doesn't sense safety. We have to convince it the danger has passed. She looked around, found a brazier, stoked it until heat radiated through the chamber, then pulled the infant closer to the warmth. Not too close, just enough to raise ambient temperature. Next, she turned to Theron. I need your blood. Not much, just a few drops. The child needs to sense his father's presence. Vampire infants respond to parental blood signature. Theron did not hesitate, drew a small blade from his belt, opened his palm, blood welled, dark red, ancient. The woman produced a clean cloth, caught the blood, then pressed it gently to the infant's lips. Nothing happened. Seconds stretched. The woman's face was tight with concentration. Theron's was unreadable, but his hands were clenched. Then, so faint it might have been imagination, a tremor. The infant's finger twitched. The woman inhaled sharply. There, again. She repositioned her hands, placed one over the child's heart, began humming, low, rhythmic, a lullaby Theron did not recognize but felt in his bones. The infant's lips moved, barely, but visible. Color began returning, the too pale skin warming, flushing, and then, like a miracle dragged kicking from the void, the infant drew breath, small, weak, but unmistakable. His chest rose, fell, rose again. A sound escaped him, not a cry, more of a whimper, but alive, undeniably alive. Theron moved without thinking, crossed the distance in 2 strides, looked down at his son, at the face that was no longer still, at the tiny body that shuddered with new breath. He lives. The words were disbelief, wonder, relief so profound it bordered on pain. The woman stepped back, giving Theron space. Yes, he'll need monitoring. His system is still fragile, but the stillness is broken. He's coming back. Theron reached down, touched his son's cheek with one finger. The skin was warm, real. The infant turned toward the touch, instinct seeking comfort. Something in Theron's chest, something he had thought calcified beyond repair, cracked. Not broke, but shifted. Made space for something he had not expected to feel. Vulnerability, fierce and terrifying. He looked at the woman, really looked. Not as a servant, not as a daughter of a traitor, as the person who had just saved the only thing in his kingdom that truly mattered. Your name, not a question, a demand, but softened, almost gentle. Isla Brennan, daughter of Magnus Brennan, keeper of forbidden knowledge, savior of the heir. Theron straightened, assumed the mantle of king again. But something had changed. In the space between death and life, between despair and hope. You will be protected, by royal decree. Anyone who harms you answers to me. Isla's eyes widened. That's not necessary, I just wanted to help. It's not your choice. Theron's voice was absolute. You saved my son. That creates a debt, and I pay my debts. Before Isla could respond, the door opened. Lucien Vex entered. Theron's oldest advisor, 400 years of service etched in every careful movement. He carried an armful of texts, ancient leather bindings, stained pages, the accumulated knowledge the blood court had deemed too dangerous for common access. Lucien's gaze swept the chamber, noted the living infant, the human woman, the king's protective stance. His expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened, calculating, already seeing the political ramifications. "Your Majesty, the texts you requested." He set them on a side table, though I confess confusion about the urgency. Theron gestured to Isla. She diagnosed crimson stillness, using her father's research. "My son lives because of knowledge the court tried to bury." Lucien's gaze flicked to Isla. Recognition sparked. "You're Magnus Brennan's daughter." "Yes." Her voice was steady, despite being in a room with two of the most powerful vampires in the kingdom. Lucien looked at Theron. "This is complicated. Everything is complicated." Theron's tone carried finality. "But my son breathes. That simplifies my priorities." Lucien nodded slowly, then with respect that felt earned rather than obligatory. "Miss Brennan, thank you. The kingdom is in your debt." Isla did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just inclined her head. Theron moved to his son, lifted him carefully. The infant settled against his chest, small fists curling into the fabric of the king's shirt, seeking warmth, safety, the things all newborns needed. "Lucien," Theron spoke without looking up, "convene the blood court, immediately. We have matters to discuss." Lucien's expression flickered. Concern, understanding. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should wait. Give the physicians time to verify the child's recovery. Announcing this prematurely could cause unrest." Theron's eyes lifted, met Lucien's. Cold, absolute. "The court tried to bury my son before he was dead. I want to know why. And I want to know what else they're hiding." Lucien recognized the tone, had heard it before, usually right before someone lost their position, or their head. "Of course, I'll make arrangements." He left, quickly, leaving Theron and Isla alone with the infant who had been dead and was now decidedly not. Isla watched the king hold his son, saw the careful way Theron supported the small head, the gentle rocking motion, the absolute focus. This was not the tyrant who'd signed her father's execution, or rather, it was. But it was also something else, something more complex than the simple monster she'd built in her mind over 12 years of grief. She should hate him, should despise every breath he took. But watching him with his son, seeing the raw relief and fierce love, made hatred feel like a luxury she could not afford. Her father had believed healing transcended politics, had died for that belief, and now Isla stood in a position to honor that legacy, to prove that knowledge mattered more than vengeance, even if the man she was helping had destroyed her family. "Your Majesty." Her voice was quiet. "Your son will need careful monitoring for the next 48 hours. The stillness can recur if conditions aren't right. He needs warmth, quiet, and someone who understands the signs." Theron looked at her. "You will provide that care." Not a request, a statement, but Isla felt no urge to refuse. "Yes, I will." "Good. You'll be moved to chambers in the medical wing, royal guest quarters. You'll have whatever resources you need." "That's generous." Isla hesitated. "But the court won't like a human in the inner palace, especially one related to a traitor." Theron's expression hardened. "The court will accept what I decree, or they will find themselves reconsidering their positions." The threat was casual, absolute. This was a king who did not accept challenges to his authority. But beneath the steel, Isla sensed something else. Protectiveness. Not for her. For the principle. For the idea that competence mattered more than bloodline. Or perhaps just for the fact that she'd saved his son. And Theron Ashcroft protected what belonged to him. Even if what belonged to him was a human woman carrying dangerous knowledge. The blood court convened at midnight. Emergency sessions were rare, suggested crisis, demanded attendance from all 7 council members. The chamber was ancient, black stone carved with runes that predated the kingdom, high ceiling lost in shadows, a table formed from single slab of volcanic glass, 7 seats arranged in perfect hierarchy. The council members filed in, ancient vampires who'd advised kings before Theron was born, who'd survived regime changes, who'd learned that survival meant reading political winds. Chief Physician Mordain entered last. His expression was carefully neutral, but his hands betrayed tension. He knew why he'd been summoned. Theron stood at the head of the table. His son was with wet nurses under Isla's supervision, safe, protected, alive. That last part was what this meeting addressed. Theron did not waste time on formality. My son lives. The words dropped like stones. The council members exchanged glances, carefully blank expressions that meant they were frantically recalculating. Mordain cleared his throat. Your Majesty, that's wonderful news. But our examination was thorough. Perhaps there was merely a delay in vital signs manifesting. Number. Theron's voice was ice. My son was suffering from crimson stillness, a condition your examination completely missed, a condition documented in texts the court has suppressed. Mordain stiffened. Your Majesty, those texts deal with bloodline abnormalities, conditions that suggest impurity. We deem them dangerous to public knowledge. Dangerous. Theron leaned forward. Or inconvenient. Because acknowledging crimson stillness means acknowledging that vampire bloodlines can carry human traits, that purity is not absolute, that your precious doctrine is built on comfortable lies. Elder Cassius spoke, the oldest council member, 6 centuries of political maneuvering carved into his face. Your Majesty, the doctrine protects our people, maintains order. If we admit weakness in our bloodlines, we invite challenges. From enemies, from our own citizens. Theron's hands flattened on the table. My son nearly died because you buried information that could have saved him. Explain why I should not execute every person responsible. The threat was real, absolute. No one in the chamber doubted Theron's willingness to follow through. Mordain spoke carefully. We believed we were serving the kingdom's interests, maintaining the strength of our image. We did not anticipate a situation where that information would be critical. You did not anticipate. Theron's voice dropped, became quieter, more dangerous. You played politics with my son's life. Elder Cassius intervened. Smooth, diplomatic. With respect, Your Majesty, the issue is not just your son, it's the precedent. If the heir carries signs of mixed heritage, it raises questions about succession legitimacy. There it was, the core concern, not the infant's life, the political ramifications of that life. Theron's eyes swept the council, reading them. These were not evil men, were not cruel, but they were pragmatic, had spent centuries learning that truth was malleable. That perception mattered more than reality. My son is the legitimate heir, born of my union with the queen consort. His blood is mine. That is the only legitimacy required. But the council was not satisfied. Elder Cassius continued, We do not question your word, Majesty, but rumors will spread, questions will arise, especially given how his life was saved, by a human using banned knowledge. Ah, there it was, the real concern, not the infant, Isla. Miss Brennan saved my heir when your physicians declared him dead. That makes her invaluable to this kingdom. Theron's tone invited no argument. Mordain leaned forward. With respect, Your Majesty, Miss Brennan is the daughter of Magnus Brennan, a convicted traitor. Her knowledge comes from forbidden research. Allowing her into the inner palace sets dangerous precedent. She has already been moved to royal quarters, under my protection. That precedent is set. Theron's gaze pinned Mordain. The question is whether you will accept it or whether I need to find a new chief physician. The threat was clear. Mordain paled. Your Majesty, I serve at your pleasure. Then serve by ensuring my son's health, not by protecting doctrine that nearly killed him. The council members exchanged glances, reading the situation. Theron was unmovable on this. The human woman would stay, the son would be acknowledged, the doctrine would be challenged. The question was whether they could manage the political fallout. Elder Cassius tried a different approach. Perhaps we could compromise. Miss Brennan stays, but quietly. No official position, no public acknowledgement. We keep the circumstances of the heir's recovery confidential. Number. Theron's voice was flat. Hiding this proves the court was wrong. I will not reward failure with secrecy. Then what do you propose? Cassius was careful, respectful, but genuinely asking, because the political reality remained. A human in the inner palace would cause unrest. Theron had considered this, had spent the hours since his son's recovery calculating, planning, seeing 3 moves ahead the way he always did. Miss Brennan will be appointed Royal Medical Consultant, a new position. She will have access to all medical texts, forbidden or otherwise. She will oversee the heir's health, and she will train other physicians in techniques the court has suppressed. The council members stiffened. That was not compromise. That was revolution. Mordain found his voice. Your Majesty, Elevating a human to such position will infuriate the nobility, will undermine trust in vampire physicians. Then vampire physicians should become competent enough that humans do not show them up. Theron's eyes were cold. You had your chance. You failed. She succeeded. Merit matters more than bloodline in my court. It was radical, would cause exactly the unrest the council feared. But Theron did not care. His son was alive because he had been willing to listen to a servant, willing to break protocol, willing to risk. That was a lesson the council needed to learn. The session ended with no formal agreement, just understanding that Theron would do what he intended regardless of council approval, that he had decided Isla Brennan mattered, and when Theron decided something mattered, it became reality. The council members filed out, already planning, already calculating how to minimize damage. Lucian remained behind, waited until the chamber was empty. Your Majesty, this will be difficult. I know. Theron's voice was tired now, the adrenaline of crisis fading into the exhaustion of aftermath. The girl, Lucien spoke carefully. You trust her? Theron considered. Trust was too strong, but he respected her, recognized something in her determination, the refusal to let her father's death be meaningless. She saved my son, that's enough. Lucian nodded. Then I will help protect her, because the council will not give up easily, and humans in positions of power have short lifespans in vampire courts. It was not threat, was warning, honest assessment of political reality. Theron understood. Then we make sure she survives long enough to prove her value is worth the controversy. Lucian smiled slightly. As you command. The next days blurred together. Isla established herself in the medical wing, surrounded by texts she'd only dreamed of accessing. Knowledge her father had died protecting now spread before her like a feast. She studied, memorized, cross-referenced, building on her father's work, expanding it, finding patterns in bloodline conditions that the court had deliberately obscured. And she monitored the infant, who thrived, who grew stronger daily, who responded to her touch with the trust newborns gave to anyone consistent. She named him in her mind. Hadn't asked permission, didn't need to. But she thought of him as Emery, brave, survivor, fighter. Theron visited multiple times each day, checking, observing. He said little, but Isla felt his presence like gravity, constant, overwhelming, the kind of attention that came from someone who protected what was his. And the infant was his, absolutely, no question. But Isla was beginning to suspect she fell into that category too. By proximity, by necessity, by the simple fact that Theron had declared her under his protection, and Theron's declarations were law. It was unsettling, comforting, dangerous. On the 5th day, Isla made a discovery, buried in one of Magnus's old journals, a note written in code she almost missed. The crimson stillness is not random, occurs in infants with strong mixed heritage markers, human warmth, vampire strength. The body cannot reconcile the contradiction, goes dormant to survive. She read further, felt ice forming in her chest, because the implications were staggering. If Emery had experienced crimson stillness, he carried significant human traits, more than cosmetic, fundamental. His blood was mixed in ways the court would never accept. And if anyone discovered that, they would demand his removal from succession, would call him impure, unworthy, would do to him what they'd done to her father, destroy him for being what he could not help. Isla stared at the journal, at her father's careful handwriting, at the knowledge that could doom an innocent child. She should tell Theron. Honesty demanded it, but honesty could also get Emery killed. She made a decision. Would monitor the child, would document carefully, but would not share this information until she understood its full implications, until she could present it with solutions, not just problems. It was a risk. If discovered, it would look like deception, like the kind of thing that got humans executed for treason. But her father had taught her that some truths were worth dying for, and some innocents were worth protecting even at personal cost. Emery was 3 weeks old, thriving, showing no signs of recurring stillness. Isla had documented everything, built a comprehensive health profile, proved her competence in ways even Mordain could not dismiss. The council was not pleased. Rumors had spread. A human in the inner palace, elevated to consulting position, granted access to forbidden knowledge. The nobility whispered. The court factions shifted. Political alliances reformed around the question of whether Theron had gone too far. But the heir lived, undeniably. That fact alone bought Isla protection, because no one wanted to be the person who caused problems after the child's miraculous recovery. Then everything changed. A single conversation that made Isla realize the court's concerns were not paranoia, were not political theater, were genuine threat. She had been reviewing blood samples, routine work, checking Emery's development markers, and she noticed something. An anomaly, small, easily missed, but present in every sample. His blood carried human antibodies, not from his mother, from his own immune system, producing responses that vampire physiology should not generate. It meant his body was functioning partially human, that the mixed heritage was not cosmetic, was fundamental, genetic, permanent. And it meant anyone who examined his blood carefully would see it, would know, would have evidence to challenge his legitimacy. Isla sat back, felt the weight of knowledge crushing down. This was what the court feared. This was why they'd suppressed research. Because admitting mixed heritage had value meant admitting purity doctrine was wrong. She needed to tell Theron, needed to warn him, because this was not just about Emery, was about the kingdom's stability, about whether succession could survive a documented mixed heritage heir. But before she could move, the door opened. Theron entered, alone, which was unusual. He typically brought guards, maintained protocol even in private spaces, but tonight he looked tired, strained, the weight of kingship visible in ways it rarely was. Isla stood. "Your Majesty, is something wrong?" Theron crossed to where she worked, looked at the blood samples, the notes, the careful documentation. "That depends. What have you found?" Isla hesitated, choosing words carefully. "Your son is healthy, developing normally, but his blood shows unusual markers." "Unusual how?" Theron's voice was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. He already suspected. Isla pulled out her documentation, showed him the antibody readings, the immune responses, the genetic markers that did not match pure vampire lineage. "He's producing human antibodies. His immune system is hybrid, functional, but different from standard vampire physiology." Theron studied the data. His expression did not change. But Isla saw his jaw tighten, saw the understanding settle. The court would use this against him, against his claim to succession. "Yes." Isla's voice was quiet. If they discovered it, if they examined his blood this carefully, they would have evidence to challenge his legitimacy. Theron was silent, processing, calculating, the king reasserting control over the father. "Can you hide it?" The question was blunt, pragmatic. Isla wanted to say yes, wanted to protect the child she'd saved, but her father had taught her that lies in medicine killed, not forever. Eventually he'll need full examination, for illness, for injury. Any competent physician would see these markers. Then we have time. Theron's voice was decided. Time to build support, to demonstrate his fitness, to make the court care more about capability than blood purity. It was strategy, cold, practical. Exactly what Isla expected from a king who'd ruled through pragmatism. But then Theron spoke again, quieter, more raw. "I don't care what his blood shows. He's my son, my heir. And I will not let court politics destroy him the way they destroyed your father." The comparison hit Isla hard, because suddenly she saw it, the parallel. Her father had been sacrificed to doctrine, to the court's need for simple answers, for clear categories, and Theron was refusing to let that happen again, was choosing to protect his son even if it meant challenging the foundations of his own rule. It was brave, reckless, exactly what her father would have done. Isla found herself speaking without planning. "I'll help, however I can. Your son deserves to live without being destroyed for what he is." Theron looked at her, really looked, seeing not a servant, not a consultant, but an ally. Someone who understood what was at stake. "Why?" he asked. "You should hate me, should want my dynasty to fall." "I should." Isla's voice was steady. "But hating you won't save him, won't make my father's death mean anything, won't change the fact that you're trying to do right by a child who needs protection." Theron held her gaze, something passing between them, understanding, complicated and uncomfortable but real. "You're dangerous, Isla Brennan. You make me question things I spent centuries being certain about." "Is that a compliment?" she asked. "I'm not sure, but it's honest." They stood in silence, the medical wing quiet around them, a vampire king and a human woman, bound by a child who represented everything the kingdom feared and everything it needed. Outside, the court plotted, the council schemed, the factions maneuvered. But in this moment, in this room, two people made a choice: to protect an innocent, to challenge doctrine, to risk everything for the principle that some lives mattered more than political convenience. It was the beginning of something neither fully understood: alliance, partnership, perhaps more, though neither would admit it yet. But it was also the beginning of war, because the council would not surrender power easily, and the court would not accept a challenge to purity doctrine without fighting back. The night Isla Brennan saved the heir was the night everything changed. She just did not realize how much, how far, how irreversibly, but she would learn, and so would the kingdom. 3 weeks had passed since the night Isla saved the heir. 3 weeks of living in the inner palace, of walking corridors meant for nobility, of being watched by servants who did not know whether to bow or sneer. She existed in a strange liminal space, protected by the king, resented by the court, useful enough to tolerate but foreign enough to fear. The medical wing had become her sanctuary, a place where her value was clear, where she worked with texts her father had died to protect, where the infant Emery thrived under her careful monitoring. Tonight she sat alone in her study, surrounded by open journals, cross-referencing symptoms, building a complete picture of mixed heritage bloodlines, the work her father had started, the knowledge the court had suppressed. And she was close to something, a pattern in the data that made her skin prickle with recognition. She had been documenting Emery's development, tracking how his hybrid immunity functioned, how his body balanced vampire strength with human warmth. It was fascinating, unprecedented, the kind of research that could transform medical understanding. But buried in her father's oldest notes, encrypted in code she had only recently cracked, was something else. A genealogy chart, names connected by careful lines, royal bloodlines traced back 3 generations, and one name stopped her cold: Aldrich Ashcroft, Theron's father, late king, known for his iron rule and his legitimate heir. But according to Magnus's notes, Aldrich had also fathered a son outside his marriage, with a human woman, a herbalist from the lower city named Catherine Brennan, Isla's grandmother. She read the passage 3 times, 4, trying to find an error, a misinterpretation, anything that would make the words mean something different. But the documentation was clear, precise. Her father had not been guessing, had evidence, birth records, genetic markers, proof that Magnus Brennan was Aldrich Ashcroft's illegitimate son, which made Isla. She stopped breathing, the implications crashing over her like ice water. Aldrich's granddaughter, Theron's niece. Part of the bloodline she'd thought she had no connection to. And suddenly, everything made terrible sense. Why her father had researched bloodlines so obsessively, why the court had executed him not just for healing enemies, but for existing, for representing a challenge to succession. A reminder that royal blood was not confined to legitimate channels. Isla sat back, hands shaking. Because this changed everything. The protection Theron offered, the alliance they'd built, the trust forming between them. All of it rested on a foundation of ignorance. He did not know they were family, did not know that saving Emery meant she'd saved her own cousin once removed, did not know that her value to the kingdom was not just medical expertise, but bloodline claim. She should tell him. Honesty demanded it, but honesty could get her killed, because illegitimate royal blood was dangerous, was the thing courts eliminated, was the reason her father had hidden this information until his death. Before Isla could decide, a knock came at her door, firm, authoritative, the kind of knock that preceded royal summons. She opened it to find Lucien Vex, Theron's oldest advisor, the vampire whose eyes saw everything and revealed nothing. "Miss Brennan?" His voice was courteous, completely neutral. "The king requests your presence in his private study, immediately." Isla's heart stuttered. Immediately meant important, meant urgent, meant she did not have time to hide the journals, to conceal what she'd discovered. She glanced back at her desk, at the open genealogy, at the evidence of her heritage spread across parchment. Lucien's gaze followed hers, saw the documents. His expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Knowledge. Recognition. He knew. Had probably known for years. That was his job. To know things. To protect the king by seeing threats before they materialized. And Isla was a threat. Had always been one. The court just had not realized it yet. She met Lucien's gaze, steadied herself. "Of course, I'll come now," Lucien gestured. "After you." He did not offer to escort her. Did not need to. The command was clear, and refusal was not option. They walked in silence. Through corridors Isla had learned to navigate, past guards who watched her with distrust poorly hidden, into the royal wing where only inner circle was permitted. Theron's private study was not public, was not throne room grandeur, was personal space, books he actually read, maps he actually studied, the place where the king became a man. Isla had been here only twice before, both times for urgent matters regarding Emery's health. The space felt intimate, dangerous, like crossing an invisible line. Theron stood by the window, looking out over the city. His posture was tense, something weighing on him. Lucian cleared his throat. "Miss Brennan, Your Majesty." Theron turned. His silver eyes found Isla immediately, pinned her. That gaze that saw too much, that stripped away comfortable lies. "Leave us, Lucien." Lucien hesitated, a fraction of a second, then bowed. "As you command." He departed, closing the door with a sound like a cell ceiling. Isla stood in the center of the room, acutely aware of being alone with a king who commanded armies, who signed execution orders, who had killed her father for reasons that now felt far more complicated than simple cruelty. Theron studied her, silent stretching. Then he spoke, quiet, direct. "I received an interesting report today from the restricted archives. Apparently someone has been accessing genealogy records, very old records, the kind that detail bloodline connections the court prefers forgotten." Isla's mouth went dry. He knew, or suspected, and this conversation would determine whether she survived the night. She chose honesty, partial honesty, carefully measured. "I've been researching mixed heritage conditions, following my father's work. The genealogies provide context for bloodline markers." Theron moved closer, not threatening, but deliberate, each step closing distance. "And what did you find?" "Everything." But she could not say that. Not yet. Not without understanding his reaction. "I found that mixed bloodlines are more common than the court admits, that vampire human children have been born throughout history, usually hidden, often eliminated." Theron stopped 3 feet away, close enough to hear her heartbeat, to smell her fear. "Is that all you found?" Isla met his eyes, forced steadiness she did not feel. "No." His expression did not change, but something in the air shifted, became charged. "Tell me." And Isla made a choice, the same choice her father had made, to trust truth over comfortable lies, to risk everything for principle. "I found my father's genealogy research." Her voice was steady, careful. "He documented that Aldrich Ashcroft, your father, had an illegitimate son, with a human woman. That son was Magnus Brennan, my father." The silence that followed was absolute. Theron's face showed nothing, but Isla felt the weight of his attention like physical force. "Which makes you my niece." His voice was flat, emotionless, testing the words. "Half-niece," Isla clarified. "Through illegitimate line, no legal claim, no threat to succession, just biological fact." Theron turned away, walked to his desk, poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter. His movements were controlled, precise, the kind of control that suggested enormous effort. He held out 1 glass. Isla took it. Their fingers brushed. The contact was electric, dangerous. Theron drank, then spoke. "How long have you known?" "I discovered it tonight, in my father's encrypted notes. I came here not knowing." Isla paused. "I'm telling you because hiding it would be worse." Theron studied her over the rim of his glass. "You understand what this means? The complications it creates?" "Yes." Isla's voice was quiet. "It means my father was killed not just for healing enemies, but for existing, for representing a bloodline challenge the court couldn't tolerate." Theron's jaw tightened. "I didn't know. When I signed that order, I had no idea he was family." "Would it have mattered?" Isla asked. "If you'd known, would you have spared him?" The question hung between them, heavy, honest, because they both knew the answer was complicated. Theron set down his glass. "I want to say yes, but 12 years ago I was different, newer to the throne, more concerned with appearing strong, less willing to challenge doctrine. So no." Isla's voice held no accusation, just acceptance. "You would have killed him anyway, because sparing him would have looked weak." "Probably." Theron's honesty was brutal, but necessary. "I've made a lot of decisions I regret. That order is high on the list." "Why?" Isla asked. "Because he was family, or because he was right?" Theron looked at her. Really looked. "Both. But mostly because killing him meant losing someone who could have helped my son, could have prevented 3 weeks of hell, could have made tonight's conversation unnecessary." Tonight's conversation, Isla repeated. You mean the part where we acknowledge we're related and figure out what that means? Yes. Theron moved closer. That part. Because you being my niece, even through illegitimate line, changes things. How the court sees you, how I can protect you, how we navigate what happens next. Isla's breath caught. What happens next? Theron's gaze was intense, silver eyes holding hers. The court is not giving up. They've been quiet these weeks because Emery thrives and they fear looking foolish. But they're planning, maneuvering, looking for ways to remove you without appearing to challenge me directly. Isla had suspected as much, felt it in the careful way servants avoided her, the whispers that stopped when she entered rooms. I'm making them nervous. You're making them terrified. Theron's voice held something that might have been approval. Because you represent everything they've built doctrine to prevent. Human with royal blood, woman with forbidden knowledge, living proof that their carefully maintained hierarchies are illusion. So what do we do? Isla asked. Because despite everything, despite the family connection and the political complications, she trusted Theron to tell her truth, to treat her as partner rather than pawn. Theron's expression shifted, became guarded. That depends on what I'm about to show you. He crossed to a locked cabinet, opened it with a key he wore around his neck, pulled out a wooden box, ancient, sealed with wax that bore his personal mark. He placed it on the desk between them, broke the seal. Inside was a single piece of parchment. Old, fragile, covered in text written in language Isla did not immediately recognize. Theron spoke quietly. This is a curse analysis, performed by a mage I trust. On Emery, without court knowledge. Isla's chest tightened. Curse? Theron nodded. I suspected when he suffered crimson stillness. The condition is rare, too rare to be natural in this case, so I had him examined by someone capable of detecting magical interference. And? Isla's voice was barely above whisper. And he's cursed. Theron's voice was hard, controlled fury beneath. Someone placed a mortality curse on my son, designed to activate at birth, to kill him before he could take first breath. Isla felt ice spreading through her veins. That's why the crimson stillness was so severe. His body was fighting both natural development and active magical attack. Yes, Theron's hands clenched. The curse is old magic. Powerful. Placed by someone with deep knowledge of bloodline conditions and access to Emery before birth. Someone in the palace. Isla understood immediately. Someone close enough to your queen to work magic on the unborn child. Theron's expression was granite. I have suspicions, but no proof. Yet. Who? Isla demanded. Who would curse an infant? Someone who fears what he represents. Theron's voice was bitter. My son is everything the court doctrine cannot tolerate. Hybrid heritage, mixed blood, living proof that vampire and human can create something stronger than either alone, and someone wants him dead before he can demonstrate that. Isla finished. Before he can challenge the purity doctrine just by existing. Exactly. Theron pulled out a second document. This is the curse structure. It's dormant now. You breaking the crimson stillness disrupted its activation. But it's still present, still tied to his life force. And if we don't remove it permanently, it will activate again. How? Isla studied the document, her father's training kicking in, reading magical notation the way she'd read medical texts. The curse is bound to his blood, specifically to the human markers. It's designed to grow stronger as he ages. As his hybrid nature becomes more pronounced, by age 7, it will kill him. Slowly, painfully. And no one will be able to identify the cause. Isla felt sick. 7 years, that's all he had. Unless they found a way to break a curse placed by someone powerful enough to hide it from every court mage. Can it be removed? She asked. Yes. Theron's voice was carefully controlled. But the price is severe. Tell me. Isla's voice was steady. Whatever it costs. Theron looked at her. Something in his expression made her nervous, made her realize the answer was not something he wanted to say. The curse is tied to his hybrid blood. To break it requires severing that connection, which means someone has to accept that connection instead. Transfer the targeting. Take the curse into themselves. Isla understood immediately, where it would then target their human markers, their mixed heritage, her. She was the only other person in the palace with documented hybrid blood, with royal lineage and human mortality combined, the only viable vessel for a curse designed specifically for that mixture. Me, she said. You need me to take the curse. Theron's silence was answer. Isla's mind raced. processing implications. If she took the curse, it would target her human blood, would kill her, eventually, unless I give up the human markers, she said slowly. Understanding crystallizing. Remove what makes me vulnerable to the curse. Theron nodded. The mage believes it's possible to transfer the curse and then perform a ritual that would burn out your human blood markers. Replace them with vampire, essentially transform you. Not fully. You'd retain most of your human traits. But the magical signature would change, would no longer match the curse targeting. And the curse would dissipate, looking for a target that no longer existed. Isla finished. She'd read about such magic. Theoretical, dangerous, but possible. Yes. Theron's voice was rough. But the process is agonizing and permanent. Once the transformation begins, it can't be reversed. You'd lose the human warmth, the ability to walk in full sun, the mortality that makes human magic possible. You'd become something between. Not vampire, not human. Hybrid in truth. Isla stared at the documents, at the curse notation, at the formula for transformation, at the choice being laid before her. Save Emery by sacrificing her human nature. Become something other than what she was. Live as a hybrid in a court that barely tolerated her as fully human. Or refuse. Keep her nature. Watch a child die slowly over 7 years. Know she could have prevented it. It wasn't really a choice. When? She asked. When do we do this? Theron's expression cracked. Just slightly. Isla, you don't have to. I won't force this. There might be other ways. There aren't. She met his gaze. You know there aren't. This is the solution. The only one that saves him and doesn't tip off whoever placed the curse. Because if they know we're removing it, they'll try something else. Yes. Theron's voice was quiet. But you don't owe him this. Don't owe me anything. You've already saved him once. He's my cousin. Isla's voice was firm. Family. Through complicated channels but real. And my father died trying to prove that hybrid bloodlines have value. Let me prove it by becoming one. Theron studied her, looking for doubt, for hesitation, finding only resolve. You're sure? Not a question, a confirmation. I'm terrified, Isla admitted, but yes, I'm sure. The transformation ritual would take 3 days to prepare, required specific components, specific timing, specific magical conditions that only occurred during the new moon, which gave Isla 10 days before she would cease being human in any meaningful way. 10 days to prepare, to document, to make peace with the choice. The court noticed something was happening. Servants whispered, guards watched. The Blood Council convened in emergency sessions Theron did not attend. Mordain came to Isla's chambers on the 5th day, ostensibly to review Emery's health records, actually to probe. You've been conducting unusual research. His tone was carefully neutral. Magical theory, transformation rituals, areas outside your medical expertise. Isla looked up from her notes, kept her expression bland. I'm expanding my knowledge base. The king has granted me access to all texts. I'm taking advantage. Mordain's eyes were sharp, suspicious. The timing is interesting. Given that the heir seems healthy, one might wonder why such intensive study is necessary. The heir is healthy because I'm thorough. Isla held his gaze. Would you prefer I be less conscientious? Mordain smiled, thin, cold. Not at all, Miss Brennan. I simply want to ensure the king's trust is not misplaced, that you're not pursuing knowledge for purposes beyond the heir's welfare. What other purposes could I have? Isla asked mildly. I'm a human medical consultant with no political power, no army, no allies beyond the king's protection. What threat could I possibly pose? Mordain leaned forward. That depends on what you're planning to become. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. He suspected, did not know, but suspected, which meant someone in Theron's inner circle was leaking information. Someone close enough to know about the curse, about the transformation. Someone who wanted Mordain prepared to act when the ritual occurred. Isla kept her expression neutral. I'm not planning to become anything except better at my job. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why competence makes you nervous. Mordain's smile vanished. Careful, Miss Brennan. The king's protection has limits, and you're testing them. He left, but the message was clear. The court was watching, waiting, ready to act the moment Theron's guard dropped. Isla reported the conversation to Theron that night, in his study, alone again. These meetings had become routine, dangerous, intimate in ways neither acknowledged. Theron listened without interrupting, then spoke carefully. Mordain suspects. which means someone told him. Someone who knows about the curse. How many people know? Isla asked. Theron counted on his fingers. Myself, you, Lucian, the mage who performed the analysis, and possibly one other person I haven't confirmed yet. Who? Isla's voice was sharp. Theron hesitated, then admitted, my mother. Isla felt the floor tilt. Your mother is alive? Theron's expression was complex. Somewhere. She disappeared 20 years ago, claimed to be going on spiritual retreat, never returned. But I have reason to believe she knows more about Emery's curse than she should. You think she placed it? Isla said, understanding crystallizing. Your own mother cursed your son. Theron's silence was confirmation. Isla sat back, processing. Why? Why would a grandmother want her own grandchild dead? Because she fears what he represents. Theron's voice was tired. My mother is old, ancient, even by vampire standards. She remembers when humans were prey, when the idea of mixed blood was abomination, when vampire rule was absolute, and Emery challenges all of that. Isla finished, just by existing. Yes. Theron rubbed his face, rare gesture of exhaustion. She likely placed the curse before leaving. Time to activate at birth, ensuring my line died, ensuring the kingdom would pass to someone who'd maintain the old ways. To who? Isla asked. You have no siblings, no clear successor. The council would choose, Theron said. Likely Cassius, ancient, conservative, everything my mother believes a king should be. Isla understood. This wasn't just about Emery. It was about the kingdom's future, about whether vampire rule would evolve or calcify into doctrine that no longer served reality. Does she know about the transformation ritual? Isla asked. Does she know I'm going to take the curse? I don't know, Theron admitted. But if she does, she'll try to stop it. Because me having a hybrid ally, someone with royal blood who's chosen transformation, validates everything she cursed Emery to prevent. So the ritual is dangerous, not just physically, politically. Isla was beginning to understand the scope. Yes. Theron's voice was heavy. Which is why I'll give you one more chance to refuse. Walk away. Leave the palace. I'll protect your exit. Get you somewhere safe, where the court can't reach, where my mother's agents can't find you. Isla considered. It was genuine offer. Theron would let her go, would keep his word about protection even if she refused to help further. But leaving meant Emery died, meant the court won, meant her father's legacy ended with her survival rather than her courage. Number. Her voice was firm. We do the ritual. I take the curse. We save him. Theron looked at her. Something in his expression that might have been gratitude or might have been grief. You're braver than anyone I've ever known. I'm terrified, Isla corrected, but I'm doing it anyway. That's what bravery is, Theron said quietly. They sat in silence. The study warm despite the winter outside. Two people bound by impossible choices. By family connections neither had wanted. By the growing sense that they were fighting something larger than just one curse, larger than one child. They were fighting doctrine, history, the comfortable certainty that had governed vampire society for millennia, and they were doing it together. Theron spoke first. After the transformation. After you're changed. Things will be different. The court will have to acknowledge you're not just human, not just consultant. You'll be unprecedented, unique, frightening, Isla added. That too. Theron's voice held something that might have been humor. But you'll also be under even more protection, because unprecedented things are valuable, are assets the kingdom needs. I don't want to be an asset. Isla's voice was quiet. I just want to save a child who doesn't deserve to pay for his grandmother's fear. I know, Theron said. But you're going to be more than that, whether you want it or not, because the moment you transform, you prove hybrid bloodlines are possible, are powerful, are the future the court is trying to prevent. Isla met his gaze. Is that what you want, a hybrid future? Theron was quiet, then honest. I don't know. But I know the alternative is stagnation, is doctrine that serves fear rather than strength, is a kingdom that kills children for being born different, and I refuse to rule that kingdom anymore. It was declaration. Transformation more profound than anything ritual could achieve. The king choosing to change not just policy, but principle. To build something new even if it meant burning what came before. Isla understood in that moment that this was bigger than Emery, bigger than her choice. This was about whether the kingdom would survive its own fear, would evolve or collapse under the weight of doctrine that no longer matched reality. And somehow she'd become central to that question, the human woman with royal blood who'd chosen transformation over safety. Who'd decided that proving her father right mattered more than her own comfort. She felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the danger, but she also felt something else, purpose. The kind her father must have felt when he'd chosen to heal enemies, to research forbidden knowledge, to risk everything for principle. She was her father's daughter, and she would honor his legacy by being brave enough to change, even if it killed her. The night before the transformation, Isla could not sleep. Her mind raced, reviewing everything that would happen, everything that would change, everything she would lose. Human warmth, the ability to eat normal food, to walk in full sunlight, to age naturally, to remain what she'd been born as. She would become hybrid, neither fully human nor fully vampire, something between, something new, something that would mark her as different forever. She sat by her window, watching the city below, the lights, the movement, the life that would continue regardless of her choice. A knock came at her door, soft, tentative, not Theron's authoritative summons, something else. She opened it to find Lucian Vex, holding a wooden box. "Miss Brennan?" His voice was formal, but something in his eyes suggested this was not official business. "May I enter?" Isla stepped back. Lucian entered, closed the door carefully. He held out the box. "This belonged to your father. I've kept it, waiting for the right moment to return it." Isla took the box, opened it. Inside was a journal, leather worn smooth, her father's handwriting filling the pages. She looked up, eyes burning. "You knew him. I was the one who arrested him." Lucien's voice was quiet, regret coloring the words. "I followed orders, did my duty, and I've regretted it every day since." "Why?" Isla asked. "Why regret following orders?" "Because he was right," Lucian said simply. "About everything. About hybrid bloodlines. About the court's fear. About what the kingdom needed, and I helped destroy him for it. So why give me this now?" Isla held the journal like it might vanish. "Because tomorrow you're going to prove him right." Lucian's voice was steady. "You're going to become what he died researching, and I want you to know that someone remembers. Someone knows the price he paid. Someone honors what you're about to do." Isla felt tears threatening, pushed them back. "Thank you." Lucian nodded, then spoke more carefully. "The king cares for you, more than he should, more than is wise given the complications." Isla's breath caught. "I know." "Do you?" Lucian's eyes were sharp. "Because the transformation will not make things simpler, will make them infinitely more complex. You'll be bound to him by blood magic, by the ritual, by the fact that you saved his son twice. The court will read into that. We'll see connections that may or may not exist." "Are you warning me?" Isla asked. "Or threatening me?" "Neither." Lucien's voice was mild. "Simply ensuring you understand the full scope of what tomorrow means. For you, for him, for the kingdom." "I understand," Isla said. "At least I think I do." "Then that's enough." Lucian moved to the door, paused. "Your father would be proud of your courage, of your choice, of who you've become." He left before Isla could respond, left her alone with her father's journal, with the weight of tomorrow, with the understanding that she was walking into something that would define not just her life, but the kingdom's future. She opened the journal, read her father's notes, his hopes, his fears, his belief that hybrid bloodlines were not weakness, but strength, that mixing vampire and human created something more resilient than either alone. And she understood. This was what she was becoming. The proof, the evidence, the living demonstration that her father's work had value. She read until dawn, until the sun began rising, until servants knocked to begin transformation preparations, and when she stood, when she dressed, when she walked to the ritual chamber. She did so with certainty. This was right, was necessary, was the only choice that honored everything her father had died believing. Theron met her at the chamber door. He looked like he had not slept either. His face was drawn, tight, the mask of control barely holding. "Are you ready?" His voice was rough. "Number." Isla's honesty was stark. "But I'm doing it anyway." Theron's hand lifted, almost touched her face, stopped, because touching would make this harder, would blur lines that needed to stay clear. "After tomorrow," his voice was low, "everything changes." "I know." Isla met his gaze, held it. "For me, for Emery, for all of us." Theron nodded, then stepped aside. The ritual chamber waited. Ancient stone, carved runes, a circle marked in silver where Isla would stand while magic remade her. She entered, did not look back, because looking back would invite doubt, and doubt would kill her before the transformation ever could. The door sealed behind her. The ritual mage waited. And Isla Brennan, human medical consultant, daughter of an executed traitor, niece to a king, prepared to become something the world had never seen. Something that would either save a kingdom or destroy everything she'd worked for. She would not know which until the ritual was complete. And by then, it would be far too late to choose differently. The pain was beyond description, beyond anything Isla had imagined pain could be. It was not fire, was not ice, was existence itself becoming agony, every cell in her body rewriting, every marker of her humanity burning away to make space for something else. She screamed, could not help it. The sound tore from her throat raw and animal, the kind of scream that acknowledged suffering too vast for silence. The ritual circle glowed, silver light that hurt to look at. Magic old as the kingdom flowing through runes carved by vampires who'd understood transformation before doctrine made it forbidden. The mage, Elowin, stood outside the circle, chanting, her voice steady despite the horror she was inflicting. This was necessary. This was chosen. But necessary did not make it less terrible. Isla felt her blood changing, felt the human warmth leaving her veins, felt vampire coldness replacing it. Not death, transformation. Her heart still beat, but slower, stronger, different. Her vision sharpened, colors became more vivid. She could see individual dust motes in the air, could count the threads in Elowin's robe from 20 feet away. Vampire sight, predator sight. The world rendered in detail humans never perceived. Her hearing expanded. She heard her own heartbeat, heard Elowin's breathing, heard conversations happening 3 floors above. The sensory overload was crushing. Too much information, too much clarity. She wanted to close her eyes but could not. The ritual demanded awareness. Theron stood outside the circle, motionless. His face was stone, but his hands were clenched white. Watching someone suffer for his son was clearly torture, but he did not look away, did not give her the insult of pretending this was easy. The transformation reached critical phase, where human and vampire markers collided, where Isla's body decided which would dominate. This was the moment the mage had warned about, where some candidates died, where the body rejected the change and simply stopped. Isla felt her heart stutter, felt the moment of decision. Human mortality fighting vampire eternity, both screaming for dominance, both refusing to cede. Then Emery's face flashed in her mind, the infant who'd been still, who'd breathed because she'd refused to accept death, who would die at 7 if she failed here, who deserved a life not defined by his grandmother's fear. The thought anchored her, gave her will something to grip. She pushed, not physically, mentally, forcing her body to choose, to accept transformation rather than fight it. Her heart steadied, the human markers bent, did not break but yielded, made space, integrated rather than replaced. The pain peaked, then began receding, slowly, like tide pulling back to reveal new shore. When it finally stopped, Isla collapsed. The ritual circle faded. Elowin sagged. The spell complete. Theron was across the room in heartbeat, catching Isla before she hit stone. His arms were strong, careful. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, carried her to the bed prepared for recovery. She looked up at him, saw his face with new clarity, saw worry carved in every line, saw relief beginning to edge through. Did it work? Her voice was hoarse, destroyed by screaming. Theron's hand touched her face, checking. His fingers were cool against her skin, or rather, her skin was cool now. Temperature matched, hybrid warmth that fell between human heat and vampire cold. Yes, his voice was rough. You survived. The transformation is complete. And the curse? Isla had to know, had to hear confirmation that her agony had purpose. Elowin approached, exhausted but satisfied. The curse transferred, then dissipated when your markers changed. It's gone, unable to target what no longer exists. Her voice held respect. You've done what I've never seen done. Survived transformation with your mind intact. Become hybrid in truth. Isla closed her eyes. Relief so profound it felt like its own pain. Emery was safe. The curse could not kill him. Her sacrifice had worked. Then she passed out, body demanding rest after trauma, mind retreating to process what she'd become. She woke 3 days later, In chambers she did not recognize, rich fabrics, windows that showed the inner gardens, royal guest quarters, the kind reserved for important visitors. Someone had been caring for her, changing bandages she did not remember needing, monitoring her recovery. The medical protocols were precise, professional. A servant entered, saw Isla awake. Face went through complicated journey, fear, respect, uncertainty. She curtsied, unprompted. "Miss Brennan, I'll inform His Majesty you've woken." She fled before Isla could respond, before Isla could ask why a servant was curtsying to her, before Isla could process that she was being treated like nobility rather than staff. Theron arrived within minutes. He looked better than when she'd last seen him, less haggard, though his eyes carried weight that suggested the 3 days had not been easy. He sat beside her bed, close but not touching. "You're awake. How do you feel?" Isla considered. "Different. Everything is sharper, louder. I can hear your heartbeat from here, can smell. Things I couldn't before. It's overwhelming." "That will settle." Theron's voice was gentle. "Your mind will learn to filter, to focus. Give it time." "How is Emery?" Isla asked, because that mattered more than her adjustment. "Healthy, thriving, completely free of curse markers." Theron's voice held gratitude. "You saved him, again, at cost I cannot repay." "You don't need to repay," Isla said. "He's family, complicated family, but real." Theron's expression shifted. "About that. There have been developments. While you recovered. Political developments we need to discuss." Isla pushed herself upright, ignored the way her body protested. "What kind of developments?" Theron stood, paced, restless. "The court learned about the transformation, not the details, but that you underwent ritual magic, that you're no longer fully human. Mordain is calling emergency council session, demanding explanation. Cassius is calculating. Lucian is managing, but it's unstable." "How did they find out?" Isla asked. "You kept the ritual secret." Theron's jaw tightened. "Someone talked, someone who knew, and I believe I know who." "Your mother." Isla understood. "She's making her move." "Yes." Theron turned to face her. "She sent a message. To the council, claiming my son is cursed, claiming I've allowed dark magic in the palace, claiming you're a threat to the kingdom. She's positioning to return, to remove me if necessary, to place someone more traditional in power. Can she do that?" Isla felt cold, the political ramifications crashing down. "She has influence," Theron admitted. "Ancient connections, allies who remember when she ruled beside my father. If she convinces enough of the council that I've gone too far. Yes, she could force abdication, could install Cassius, could undo everything we've worked for. Then we need to move first." Isla's mind was already working, using the clarity her transformation had given her. "We need to prove Emery is healthy, that your choices have been right, that transformation is strength, not weakness." "How?" Theron asked. "Because I've been trying to find that path for 3 days, and I keep hitting walls." Isla stood, swayed. Theron caught her arm, steadied her. She looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the fear, the weight of trying to protect everyone while the ground crumbled beneath him. "You call a full council, public, witnessed. You present Emery, healthy, strong. You present me, transformed, alive. You prove that hybrid bloodlines are not abomination but evolution, and you dare your mother to challenge evidence instead of doctrine. That's incredibly risky," Theron said. "If the council rejects the proof, if they side with fear over fact, I lose everything." "You're already losing," Isla pointed out. "At least this way you lose while fighting for something worth defending." Theron studied her. Then something in his expression shifted, became decided. "You're right. Hiding has not worked. Time to force the confrontation. On our terms." He crossed to the door, called for Lucian. When his advisor arrived, Theron was already issuing orders. "Convene the Blood Council. Tomorrow. Full attendance mandatory. Prepare the Great Hall for witnesses. This will be public." Lucien's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, that's unprecedented. Council sessions are private. Opening to witnesses invites chaos." "Good." Theron's voice was hard. "Let there be chaos. Let the kingdom see what's really happening. Let them decide whether they want a future built on fear or one built on fact." Lucien looked at Isla, saw her standing despite obvious exhaustion, saw the change in her, the hybrid nature visible in ways only vampire senses could detect. His expression became complex. "You've transformed her into a symbol," he said quietly. "Do you understand that? She's no longer just consultant. She's the proof your reforms have merit, and symbols get destroyed by those who hate what they represent." "I know." Theron's voice was grim. "Which is why I'm making it as public as possible. Harder to quietly eliminate someone the entire kingdom has witnessed." Lucian nodded slowly. "Then I'll make preparations. And Miss Brennan?" His gaze shifted to Isla. "Welcome to the dangerous side of history, where everything you do matters and nothing you do is safe." He left, leaving Theron and Isla alone with the weight of what came next. Isla spoke first. "Your mother will be there at the council. She won't be able to resist." "I know," Theron said, "which is why I'm counting on it, because she's been hiding for 20 years, making moves from shadows. Time to drag her into light, force her to defend her position publicly." "What if she's stronger than you think?" Isla asked. "What if she has more support than we know?" "Then we lose." Theron was honest. "But we lose while trying, while fighting for something that matters. And maybe that's enough to change minds even in defeat." Isla moved closer, put her hand on his arm, felt the cool of his skin match hers now. Hybrid temperature. Not human warmth, but not vampire cold either. Something between. "Thank you." Her voice was quiet. "For not making me do this alone. For standing with me even when it's dangerous." Theron looked down at her hand, at the touch that would have been impossible before transformation. That now felt natural, equal. "You stood with me first, when no one else would. When saving Emery meant admitting court failure. When every reason said to stay quiet and safe, you chose courage." His eyes met hers. "I'm just trying to match it." Something passed between them. Unspoken. Complicated. Not quite romance, not quite alliance. Something that defied easy category. Connection born from shared purpose, from understanding, from the strange intimacy of fighting together against impossible odds. Theron's hand covered hers, warm compared to her new temperature, strong, steady. The king reasserting control over the man. "Tomorrow everything changes." Again. His voice was low. "Are you ready?" "Number," Isla admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway. That seems to be my approach to everything lately." Theron almost smiled. "Then you're more resilient than most of my council. They need certainty before acting. You act and figure out certainty later." "Is that compliment or criticism?" Isla asked. "Admiration," Theron said simply, "and possibly envy. I've spent 2 centuries calculating, planning 3 moves ahead. You jump and trust you'll land right. It's terrifying and effective." Isla squeezed his hand, then released it, stepped back, because proximity was dangerous, made thinking harder, made professionalism blur into something else. "I should rest, before tomorrow." The transformation took more than I want to admit. Theron nodded, but did not move to leave. "Not yet. Isla, if this goes wrong, if the council turns against us, if my mother succeeds in removing me, you need to run, immediately. Lucian has prepared escape routes, resources. Get to the eastern border, cross into neutral territory. Don't look back." Isla stared. "You're planning my escape while planning to fight?" "I'm planning contingencies." Theron's voice was matter-of-fact. "I protect what's mine. You're under my protection. That means I ensure your survival regardless of outcome." "What's yours?" Isla repeated, the phrase carrying weight neither addressed. "Is that what I am?" Theron met her gaze. "Steady, honest. You saved my son. Twice. At cost no one should have to pay. Yes, you're mine to protect, and I take that responsibility seriously." It wasn't declaration, wasn't romance, was something more fundamental. Oath, vow, the kind of promise kings made and kept even at personal cost. Isla understood, nodded. "Then I promise the same. If you fall. I protect Emery, keep him safe, ensure he grows up knowing his father died trying to give him a better kingdom." Theron's expression cracked, just slightly. "Thank you. That matters more than you know." He left then, before emotion could complicate what needed to stay clear, before the connection between them became something neither could deny. Isla was alone again, with her hybrid nature, with the coming confrontation, with the understanding that tomorrow would define not just her fate, but the kingdom's future. She slept fitfully, dreams mixing memory and fear, woke to servants preparing her, dressing her in clothes that were too fine, too noble, making her look like someone important instead of the girl who'd scrubbed floors 3 months ago. The Great Hall was packed, every noble family, every merchant guild leader, every vampire of standing. Hundreds of witnesses crammed into a space meant for ceremony, for declarations, for moments that shaped history. The Blood Council sat at the high table. 7 ancient vampires: Mordain, Cassius, Lucien, 4 others whose names Isla was still learning. They looked grave, prepared. This was not normal session. Was trial, judgment, reckoning. Theron stood before them, alone, no guards, no advisors. The king facing his council without armor of position. It was bold, vulnerable. Exactly the kind of move that either won everything or lost it. Isla stood to the side, in sight but not central. The witness, the evidence, the living proof of what Theron claimed. Cassius spoke first, ancient voice carrying through the hall. King Theron, we are summoned to address serious charges, that you have allowed forbidden magic in the palace, that the heir's health is achieved through dark ritual, that you have elevated a human to position that threatens vampire supremacy. How do you answer? Theron's voice was clear, strong. I answer that every charge is true, and that none of them are crimes. The hall erupted, whispers, gasps, shock that the king admitted rather than denied. Cassius raised a hand. Silence fell. Explain. Theron gestured to Isla. Miss Brennan underwent transformation ritual, voluntarily, to save my son's life. The ritual was not dark magic, was ancient technique the court chose to forbid because it challenged doctrine. She is now hybrid, living proof that vampire and human bloodlines can integrate, can create something stronger than either alone. Mordain stood, objecting. Your Majesty, the doctrine exists to protect our people, to maintain our strength. Allowing hybrid bloodlines validates weakness, suggests we need human traits to survive. I suggest we need adaptation to survive. Theron's voice was hard. The world is changing. Human kingdoms grow stronger. Our isolated supremacy becomes liability. Hybrid bloodlines give us diplomatic options. Alliances through blood rather than conquest. Strength through integration rather than domination. It was radical, revolutionary. The kind of idea that toppled kingdoms or built new ones. Cassius leaned forward. And the heir? What of his condition? We have heard disturbing reports. Theron did not hesitate. My son was cursed. At birth, with magic designed to kill him before age 7. The curse was placed by someone who feared what hybrid bloodlines represent. Someone who preferred a dead heir to a living symbol of change. Who? Cassius demanded. Name this person. Before Theron could answer, the great hall doors opened. Not with ceremony, with force. Magic crackling around the hinges. An entrance designed to announce power, dominance, the arrival of someone who did not ask permission. Queen Mother Alara Ashcroft entered. She was ancient, 600 years carved into immortal features, beautiful, terrible, radiating the kind of power that came from surviving centuries through cunning and ruthlessness. The hall fell absolutely silent, because everyone recognized her, everyone remembered. The queen who'd ruled beside Aldrich, who'd shaped the kingdom into what it was, who'd disappeared before anyone could question her methods. She walked to the center of the hall, looked at Theron, not as son, as opponent. I placed the curse, her voice carried effortlessly, because my grandson is abomination, hybrid blood that weakens our line, that threatens our purity, that represents everything I built this kingdom to prevent. The hall exploded. Accusations, shock, horror. A queen mother admitting to cursing her own grandchild. Theron's face was stone. Why? The question was simple. Devastating. Why curse your own blood? Alara's expression did not change, because I saw the prophecy, 60 years ago. A hybrid heir will unite the realms, will end vampire supremacy, will create new world where we are not apex predators but equals among many. She turned to address the hall. I built this kingdom on vampire strength, on our position above humans, on the natural order where immortals rule and mortals serve. I will not watch my grandson destroy that. You would rather he die. Theron's voice was cold. Would rather murder an infant than accept change. Yes, Alara said simply, because one life matters less than a kingdom's survival, less than our people's future. You've gone soft, my son. allowing humans to influence you, letting sentiment override strategy. I place the curse to spare the kingdom from your weakness, and I return now to finish what you've prevented." She moved, faster than human eye could follow, vampire speed, magic trailing her movements. She was heading for Isla, for the hybrid who'd disrupted the curse, for the proof that change was possible. But Theron was faster, met her mid-stride, blocked her path. "Mother, stop, this ends now. Move aside." Alara's voice was absolute command. "You may be king, but I am your mother. I shaped this throne, and I will not let it fall to hybrid sentiment." Theron's power flared, ancient, absolute, the magic of a vampire who'd ruled for 2 centuries through strength, not just position. You're no longer queen, no longer council, you're a threat to the heir, and threats get eliminated. They clashed, mother and son, magic against magic. The Great Hall became battlefield, witnesses scattering, council members diving for cover. This was not politics, was not ceremony, was war. Isla watched frozen. She had no magic. Transformation had burned away her human abilities, replaced them with vampire strength, but not vampire sorcery. She was powerful, but not in this fight. Theron fought brilliantly, but Alara had 600 years, had prepared for this confrontation, had planned moves he was only now reacting to. She drove him back, step by step, magic overwhelming his defenses. She was going to win, was going to kill her own son to preserve her vision of the kingdom. Isla could not allow that, could not watch Theron fall while she stood useless. She moved, not with magic, with courage, ran between them, put herself between Theron and Alara's next strike. Hybrid body absorbing magic meant to kill. The pain was instant, searing. Magic designed to end immortal life, trying to process hybrid physiology. It hurt worse than transformation, worse than anything. But it stopped Alara, made her hesitate, because Isla should have died, should have been obliterated. But hybrid nature made her resistant, made vampire magic partially ineffective. Theron used the moment, struck while his mother was confused, used her own surprise against her. The spell was not lethal, was binding, suppression, the kind used on criminals too dangerous to kill immediately. Alara collapsed, bound by her own son's magic, furious, disbelieving, defeated. The hall was silent. Witnesses processing what they'd seen, a queen mother admitting to curse, a king binding his own mother, a hybrid woman surviving magic that should have killed her. Theron stood over Alara, breathing hard, face showing nothing. "You will stand trial, will face judgment for attempted murder of the heir, and the kingdom will decide whether your vision or mine deserves to survive." He turned to Isla, who was still standing, still upright, despite the magic burning through her system. She should not have been, should have fallen. But hybrid resilience was proving stronger than either expected. "Are you all right?" His voice was urgent, concerned. "Number," Isla admitted. "But I'm standing. That's more than I expected." Theron's hand touched her face, checking. His touch was gentle, grateful. "You saved me. Again." "You saved me first," Isla pointed out. "Multiple times. I'm just returning the favor." Cassius cleared his throat. "The council recovering." "Your Majesty, this changes everything. If the Queen Mother herself placed the curse, if she admits to attempting murder, we cannot ignore that. Number." Theron's voice was firm. "You cannot, and you will witness her trial. Public, transparent, where every choice is examined, every decision questioned, where the kingdom decides what we want to be." It was gauntlet thrown, challenge to the court, to doctrine, to everything comfortable and certain. The trial took 3 days. Public sessions where every piece of evidence was presented, where Alara defended her actions with cold logic, where witnesses testified to the curse, to its effects, to its purpose, and where Isla stood as living proof that hybrid bloodlines were not weakness, were not abomination, were strength that could survive magic meant to destroy. The council's verdict was not unanimous, was close, contested, but ultimate. Alara was guilty, was stripped of title, was exiled beyond kingdom borders, to live out her centuries knowing her vision had failed, that the kingdom had chosen change over certainty. It was devastating for her, would have been death for someone less ancient, but it was also mercy, because Theron could have ordered execution, could have ended the threat permanently. Instead, he chose exile, chose to prove that even those who cursed his son could be shown mercy if they faced justice. The verdict sent shockwaves through the kingdom. a queen mother exiled, a king who valued law over blood loyalty. Proof that the old ways were ending, that new ways were beginning. And through it all, Isla stood beside Theron, not as servant, not as consultant, as ally, as partner, as the hybrid woman who'd saved the heir twice and the king once, who'd survived transformation, who'd walked through magic meant to kill her, who represented the future in ways no doctrine could deny. 3 weeks after the trial, Theron made an announcement, standing before the same council that had witnessed his mother's fall. Isla Brennan is appointed Royal Advisor on Bloodline Integration. She will work directly with me to develop policies that acknowledge hybrid heritage, that build bridges between vampire and human communities, that prepare the kingdom for the world that's coming rather than the one we wish existed. The appointment was unprecedented, revolutionary, but no one objected. Not after everything they'd witnessed, not after Isla had proven her worth through sacrifice, through courage, through the simple act of standing when everything said she should have fallen. Isla accepted the position, knowing it meant target, meant danger, meant years of fighting doctrine that would not die easily. But she also knew it meant purpose, meant honoring her father's legacy, meant proving that his death led somewhere, built something, changed the kingdom he'd loved enough to die protecting. 6 months after her transformation, Isla stood in her new study, surrounded by texts she was compiling, creating comprehensive medical and social framework for hybrid integration. Work that would take years, maybe decades, but work that mattered. A knock came at her door. Theron. He visited often now, not just for business, for conversation, for the strange friendship that had grown from shared trauma, from mutual respect, from the understanding that they were building something neither could have built alone. "May I enter?" His formality was habit, not real barrier between them anymore. "Always," Isla said, because it was true. He was always welcome. Theron entered, closed the door, held something in his hands, small, wrapped in silk. "I brought you something." His voice was uncertain, unusual for a king who commanded with absolute authority. He unwrapped the silk. Inside was a circlet, delicate gold, set with stones that caught light, beautiful, simple, elegant. "It's not crown," Theron said quickly, "because you're not queen. Not in that sense, but it's symbol of position, of standing. Royal advisors wear them, have since my great-grandfather's reign. I want you to have yours." Isla stared at the circlet, at what it represented. Official recognition, the transformation from servant to someone who shaped policy, who influenced kingdoms, who mattered. She looked up at Theron. "Why? Why give me this now?" "Because you've earned it." Theron's voice was simple. "And because I want the kingdom to see you the way I do, as someone invaluable, as someone whose insight shapes our future, as someone who belongs at the table where decisions are made." He stepped closer, lifted the circlet. "May I?" Isla nodded, unable to speak. Theron placed the circlet on her head, adjusted it carefully, his fingers gentle. When he stepped back, something in his expression had changed, softened, become something that was not quite kingship, not quite friendship, something more. "You look like you belong here." His voice was quiet. "In the palace, in power, in the life you've built." "I feel like I'm pretending," Isla admitted. "Like any moment someone will realize I'm still the girl who scrubbed floors, who didn't belong, who was only here because of accident and necessity." "You're here because you're brilliant," Theron corrected. "Because you're brave. Because when presented with impossible choice, you chose courage over comfort. That's not accident, that's character." Isla met his gaze, saw the truth in his eyes, saw the respect, the admiration, and something else, something they'd both been carefully not naming, because naming it made it real, made it complicated, made it dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with court politics. "Theron," she started, not sure how to finish. "He saved her the trouble." "I know." His voice was low. "I know what you're thinking, what I'm thinking, and I know all the reasons it's impossible. You're my advisor, my niece through complicated bloodline, the symbol of reforms that are barely stable. Getting involved would cause complications neither of us need." "But," Isla prompted, because there was definitely a but. "But I care for you," Theron admitted. "More than advisor, more than family, more than I've cared for anyone since my queen died. And I think you feel similarly, and neither of us knows what to do with that." Isla's breath caught. Because he was right. She did feel something. Had for weeks, maybe months. Something that grew through shared crisis, through mutual respect, through the intimacy of fighting together, of trusting each other, of building future together. I do, she admitted, care, more than I should, more than is wise. Then we have a problem, Theron said, because everything in me says to pursue this, to see where it goes. But everything in my training says kings don't marry for feeling, marry for alliance, for politics, for strength. Isla's heart sank, because she understood, was disappointed but understood. Of course, you need appropriate match, someone who brings political advantage. I'm just advisor with complicated bloodline, not exactly queen material. Theron's hand lifted, touched her face. Except you are. You've proven it. Through transformation, through standing beside me when everyone else would have run, through changing the kingdom just by refusing to accept that change was impossible. If anyone deserves to stand as queen, it's you. Isla's eyes burned. Are you asking? Not yet. Theron's voice was honest. Because I need to be sure. Need to know you want this. Want me. Want the impossible complications that come with being queen to a vampire king. Want the target it puts on your back. Want the life that is never private, never simple, never safe. Isla thought about it. Really thought. About what accepting would mean. About the danger, the politics. The fact that she'd never be anonymous again. Never be able to step back. Never be able to choose simple over important. And she realized she did not want simple. Wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted the chance to build something that mattered, to honor her father by becoming something he'd never imagined possible. Ask me, she said. When you're sure, I'll be here. Theron's hand cupped her face, pulled her close. His kiss was gentle, respectful, promise rather than passion. The kiss of a king who'd decided she mattered more than politics, more than appropriateness, more than every reason that said this was impossible. When they broke apart, Theron rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure it out. The timing, the announcement, the way to make this work without destroying everything we've built. We will, Isla agreed, because I'm not going anywhere. Good, Theron said, because I need you. The kingdom needs you. And I'm done pretending that's only professional. 1 year after her transformation, Isla Brennan married Theron Ashcroft. The ceremony was public, witnessed by thousands. A hybrid woman becoming vampire queen, a king choosing love over political convenience, a kingdom acknowledging that strength came in forms doctrine had never imagined. It was controversial. The court divided, traditionalists horrified, reformers celebrating. But it was also inevitable. The culmination of everything that had started the night Isla saved the heir. The proof that change was not just possible, but necessary. And 2 years after that, Isla stood in the same birthing chamber where she'd saved Emery, holding her own newborn daughter, hybrid child born of hybrid mother and vampire king, the prophecy made flesh, the future incarnate. Theron stood beside her, looking at their daughter with wonder, with hope, with the fierce protectiveness of a father who'd already lost one child to fear, who would not lose another. What should we name her? He asked. Isla looked at the infant, at the tiny face that held both their bloodlines. That represented everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built. Catherine, after my grandmother. The woman who loved a vampire king despite every reason not to, who started this bloodline that saved us all. Theron smiled. Catherine Ashcroft, future of a kingdom, proof that hybrid heritage is strength, that change is survival, that love matters more than doctrine. He kissed Isla, gentle, grateful. The king who'd learned that vulnerability was strength, that asking for help was wisdom, that admitting you were wrong was courage greater than any battlefield victory. Below them, the kingdom continued, changing, evolving, building toward future, neither perfect nor simple but real, where hybrid bloodlines were acknowledged, where humans and vampires worked together, where doctrine bent to accommodate truth. It was not easy, would never be easy, but it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every risk, every moment of terror. Because Isla Brennan had proven something fundamental, that the girl who scrubbed floors could become queen, that the woman who saved one child could save a kingdom. That transformation was not death, but rebirth, and that sometimes the most powerful magic was not ancient spells or forbidden rituals, was simply the courage to stand up when everything said to stay down, to speak truth when silence was safer, to love when fear was easier. That was the magic that changed kingdoms, that built futures, that made all the pain and sacrifice worth bearing. Isla Brennan, once human servant, now hybrid queen, held her daughter close, felt Theron's arm around her shoulders, looked out at the kingdom that was learning slowly, painfully, to become something better than what it had been. And she smiled, because despite everything, despite the cost, despite the scars she would carry forever, she had done it, had honored her father, had saved a child, had helped build a kingdom where hybrids were not feared but celebrated, where change was not threat but promise. It was enough, more than enough, it was everything. The witch's cure had healed more than curse, had healed a kingdom's fear, a king's isolation, a woman's grief, and in healing those wounds had created something new, something stronger, something worth every sacrifice. The future waited, uncertain, dangerous, full of challenges yet to come, but Isla faced it with Theron beside her, with Emery thriving, with Catherine beginning her own story, with a kingdom that was learning, slowly, to choose courage over comfort. And that was the happiest ending anyone could ask for. Not perfect, not simple, but real, earned, and absolutely, completely theirs.